Right, good afternoon all. Welcome to today's meeting of the Adults, Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded, made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, can I remind everybody that when speaking to put their microphone on and to turn it off when they've finished. I've received apologies from Mr. Mia. And we have the excellent pleasure of Betty Newton substituting for us. So welcome this afternoon, Betty. Apologies have also been received from Mrs. Wright, who's been taken poorly, although she is going to try, if she can, to just join on Teams if she feels able to do so. So the first agenda item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January 2023. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd January are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Everybody happy? Thank you. Question time. No questions been received from members of the public. Agenda item 2, that was. Agenda item 3. There are no questions from members understanding order 7.3 and 7.5. Agenda item 4. I've not been advised of any urgent items to be taken. Agenda item 5. Do I have any declarations of interest that people wish to make known? Thank you. Agenda item 6. There are no declarations of the party whip in accordance with the Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Agenda item 7. There have been no petitions presented to this committee. So agenda item 8 on today's agenda is the first substantive report, which is the national portfolio status for Leicestershire's libraries and heritage provision, as set out on pages 13 to 18 of the agenda pack. And it's with John. No, it's not. Hold on. Yes, no, it's with the assistant. I can't read the notes. Reading glass is never going to work. Which is with the Assistant Director for Strategic Commissioning, Inderjit Lahell, supported by the Head of Service for Communities and Wellbeing, Fran Wills.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll open briefly, but hand over to Fran for a bit more detail. But ultimately, this is a pretty positive piece of news and funding for the council and the directorate. So, Communities and Wellbeing have successfully applied for and received funding for 3 years for our library and heritage services. It's over £250,000 a year, so it's about £750,000 across 3 years. And it's to deliver a culture programme in the county called MPO. It's a national portfolio organisation. The funding's from the Arts Council England. So a very, very positive piece that will help the service to really target both pulling in and reaching out to a lot of different communities in the county. But I'll hand over to Fran for a bit more detail, if that's okay, Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. As Inderjit has just said, the funding comes from Arts Council England. They're funded by DCMS, Department Culture, Media and Sport, and they're the National Development Agency for Culture and Creativity, and libraries and museums sit within its remit. Arts Council England provides a 3-year funding programme called National Portfolio Organisation, and it offers it to organisations that can help it deliver its strategy, which is called Let's Create. Leicestershire's Libraries and Heritage Services successfully bid for this investment earlier in the year, and we'll launch our MPO programme in April 2023, and that will run through until the 31st of April 2026. And as Indy's just said, we've secured just over £780,000 over the 3 years. The paper takes you through the elements of that in detail, but there are 4 key strands of activity in our programme, and they're detailed in paragraphs 12 to 17 of your report. Strand 1, which is paragraphs 12 and 13, talk about Culture Leicestershire, and that's how we'll develop a cultural strategy. We want to ensure that Leicestershire County Council's cultural offer meets the needs of its residents and visitors. We want to make sure we're reflective of the wider cultural landscape. There are other providers of culture within the county. We want to work in partnership with them, and we want to develop our use of data so that we can evidence impact and inform future decision making. Strand 2, which is called Community Curators, that will enable more community voices to be heard in our Market Town Museum. So that's Melton, Harborough and Charnwood museums. In particular, those communities and audiences that don't currently engage with our services or are underrepresented. And we'll also support some independent museums within the county in that Strand 2. Strand 3 is in paragraph 15, and that's called Creative Expressions in Libraries. And that's looking at unlocking the potential of the library network that we have, seeking to work with creative practitioners to develop activities in our libraries, to see them develop as vibrant community hubs, and also support those creative practitioners to use our library spaces for a range of activity. And we'll have a particular focus on children and families and the early years. And Strand 4 is called Culture to You. This is initially a pilot project focusing on Oadby and Wigston, as that's the only levelling up for culture area in the county. And we'll look to develop a provision that enables people to select from a range of cultural resources, such as books, artworks, memory boxes, digital resources, that they can access in their own homes or their care settings. It's separate to the home library service, but it will be quite closely aligned because you can see that there are some synergies there. Arts Council requires all of its national portfolio organisations to demonstrate how they embed Arts Council's 4 investment principles throughout what they do. The investment principles are outlined in paragraphs 18 to 23, so they're ambition and quality, environmental responsibility, dynamism and inclusivity and relevance. Strong governance is another important requirement, and in addition to the robust processes that Council already have through its scrutiny and cabinet processes, the MPO programme will also have a programme delivery board, which will be responsible for the creative direction and development of the programme, and it will also have a remit to facilitate creative dialogue and constructive challenge, and that programme board will also include some external partners to help us with that. In addition, there will be an internal officer oversight group which will monitor progress and our finances. There will be a community connectors network which will enable the voice of local people to be heard and shape the decisions that we make, and also a cultural youth forum to make sure the voice of young people is heard throughout. Paragraphs 26 to 29 give a bit more detail around the funding arrangements, and the funding agreement has now been signed, and we have our programme agreed. Leicestershire's Library and Heritage Service is really passionate about our county's cultural provision, and we have a clear commitment to ensuring that everyone in Leicestershire, in particular those currently excluded or underrepresented, has the opportunity to engage with great art and cultural activity. If you'd like to see a bit more about what we do, please visit our website, which is www.cultureleicestershire.co.uk, or you can always pop in and visit a Leicestershire library or museum. Access to culture has a positive impact on people's sense of well-being and identity, and in turn that improves and sustains good mental health and well-being. Leicestershire's Library and Heritage Service is a vital contributor to this for Leicestershire. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Fran. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's good news that we've got this funding coming through. I think reading through the report, it kind of highlights what we're trying to achieve, the end game, but I didn't really feel there was much meat on the bones to actually tell you how we're going to spend the money, apart from some wages for a few officers and things like that. How's it physically going to manifest itself? What are the public, what are the residents going to see? And what's the impact? What's the target audience? How many people do we think, and how many residents is this money going to help? And the reason I ask is it's great to have £780,000, but if we were spending that and it's only going to help 2 people out, it wouldn't be a very good spend. So there's nothing in the report that kind of lets me know the impact it's going to have, and there's nothing in the report that really lets me know how we're physically going to spend £780,000, what we're going to do with it.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. There is an element in terms of the first year of the programme that is fairly well set. So in terms of the Culture Leicestershire strand, we are working with University of Nottingham around data strategy and the cultural strategy. So that will be starting with a symposium where we're bringing other local authorities that have already got cultural strategies together and start to develop those things ourselves. We've also got some work around our website so that we can share our product, if you like, so the events and activities that we have much more effectively than we do at the moment. So that will hopefully allow us to reach out to more audiences. There'll be a big piece of work setting up the community connectors group, and I think one of the things that's really important in our programme is we've said all the way through this is around co-production and co-creation. So at the moment some of that detail can't be set because we don't have those formats in place to work with local people to say what they want. In terms of community curators, we will have a new exhibition co-curated with community partners at each of our 3 Market Town museums in year 1, and we will also work with 2 independent museums as well. So there'll be 5 new exhibitions created over the year, so that will be one strand. In terms of creative expressions in libraries, we'll be looking to commission at least 2 artists in residence to work within our libraries, and that we haven't determined which of those libraries are because we want to have that consultation with local communities, and they will drive activity across different libraries. It won't be in every single of the 16 libraries in terms of specific activity, but we should see it in at least 6 and possibly more. And one of the things about the first part of the programme is actually for us to learn. We haven't done a lot of this before, so some things will work really well, some things might be less effective, and we have to take that on board for the next phase of the programme. And in terms of Culture to You, we have most of those resources already in place, so things that we have developed in the service in previous years, but we haven't had a mechanism for making them accessible. So we have, I can't remember, I'm afraid, Mr. Champion, the targets we've got for that, but we've got some specific targets in the programme and I can let you have them. And that will also be reliant on recruiting some volunteers to help deliver that programme for us. But I'm very happy to send the details through to the chair and circulate those.
Thank you for that. So obviously, as you say, like you'll have artists in residence at certain libraries. Will you make sure that all the other libraries that aren't going to have that have enough information for people going in to know where they will be, so that if they wanted to go and see, you know, if you're in an area that hasn't got that, you can travel to one to do that. Also, obviously, you're working on the basis with places that have actually got museums, so you're able to put exhibitions in. Are those exhibitions going to be localised to that area? So we've got 2 in the Harbour district where I am. Are they going to be localised to that, or are they going to be more cover what's going in the county? And what happens for those areas that don't have museums? Do they just get left out? Thank you.
That's again really good points. In terms of the exhibitions, they'll be driven by what communities want, and I don't know whether you're aware, we work quite closely with other heritage providers, so where we have got gaps, we'll be seeking to make those partnerships where we don't have a provision. The other advantage we have by having deliberately put this in as a submission for the library and the heritage service is obviously we have fantastic coverage for our library service across all of the county. So where there's an opportunity to do something that perhaps focuses on an area, like I'm going to pick Blaby out because Mr. Richardson has made the point before, we don't have a library, don't have a museum in Blaby, but we do have a library, and we often share that activity. So we hope that the whole of the county will be reflected. We also work a lot thinking about the districts and the boroughs. So, for example, at the moment we are due to launch a new community-based exhibition in Harbour, but it is around Harbour, the district, rather than Market Harbour, although it will be in Market Harbour Library. We also intend to share the content of those exhibitions digitally so that people can access them wherever they are in the county as well. I can't remember if I've answered all your points.
Thank you, Chair.
Leon?
Thank you, Chair. I fully agree with the points made already. I would like to congratulate you about getting all this money, which is extremely important. And I really like your presentations because it answered quite a few questions I had from the document. What I want is actually just to echo the previous concerns, in particular actually itemizing where the money goes to, because this is a matter of transparency and it's a matter of fairness also, because you see, by reading this document and listening to your presentation, I'm not 100% sure that all libraries will be treated in the same way, and we're not going to have actually too much money going to this particular area, somebody gets nothing. So I will welcome to have this information circulated, because this will reassure us that there is fairness in the distribution of the services. Thank you.
I'll just sneak in. Thanks, Fran, for mentioning about the cultural desert, which is Blaby. I mean, there is no market town in Blaby district. There is only a library. I mean, so what concerns me is if we're increasing cultural awareness, how do we get to those areas that don't have museums, that don't have a library nearby? I mean, in my division, I have the library in Narborough. Well, we're the best one in the world. If you put one bucket in there, that's all you're getting for an exhibition because it's not big enough for anything else. So how are we going to bring culture to those areas where we haven't got physical buildings? Now, it strikes me that Narborough, for instance, in my division, has a very active heritage society. Are we working with a heritage society so they can do things? How are they going to be brought in? So how are we going to make sure this goes across the whole of the county rather than just those areas which are convenient because we've either got a big library or they happen to have a museum? So, yeah, if we've got pop-up museums coming, that sort of thing, you know, there's no reason why we couldn't, out of the money, presumably hire a parish centre for several weeks to put on an exhibition, things of that nature. So are we going to do anything of that nature? Because otherwise, you know, my residents cannot get to Blaby village by bus without going in and out of Leicester. So if it's in a library in Blaby and they don't drive, they're completely, to use a decent word, stuffed. So how do we actually make sure they're not in a cultural desert, which surely this money is being given to us to avoid happening?
Not sure I can entirely answer that point, but and I would also say £780,000 over 3 years is a lot of money, but it won't do everything. I think we're really conscious within the service that we're a service that supports the whole of the county. So that will be in our thinking throughout to make sure that we are being as fair and representative as possible. I think the digital solutions are really important, not only for giving sort of access to people wherever they are, but also recognising people that can't easily get out and about as well. And again, that's another importance for having things like the Community Connectors Group and having the programme board, because it will be part of their task to make sure they're challenging us on all of those things and making sure that we are looking at that and being representative as far as we can. I'm sure there will always be more that we can do, and I'm sure there'll be some people who feel that they could do with more, but I think that is our driver for all that we do. And I think if we keep having the conversations with you in Scrutiny and we make sure that the people who are represented on the programme board, and Christine will be on the programme board and the Community Connectors Group, and your point, Mr. Chairman, about working with other interested parties is absolutely the heart. This is around partnership. We're still a relatively small service, and if we don't work in partnership with heritage groups, other cultural providers, we won't be able to maximise what we do. So it's very much at the core of where we are, which is part of the reason why some of what I'm talking about seems a bit ambiguous, because we haven't had those conversations yet, and we want them to be meaningful conversations. We don't want to go in and say to people, you can shape this programme, and they go, well, actually, we've already sorted it all out and there's no shape for it. But we have worked in that way for the past 2 to 3 years, and we're quite confident that that can work effectively and deliver some really fantastic outcomes.
Thanks for that, Fran. As I said, we'll see how it goes. It'd be nice to have further updates. I mean, I said I would have started the other way around. To me, I wouldn't have been starting with our museums, because if you've already got a museum, you've already got a museum. Let's start with those areas that don't have a museum, because otherwise those areas already got something are getting double bubble, whereas the areas got nothing are still getting nothing. So surely, perhaps we should have reversed this on its head. And I suppose one of the things that was mentioned in our pre-meeting is, it might have been nice for the committee to have seen the actual bidding document as part of looking at this plan as well. So I don't know if that's able to be circulated as well. Ed?
Right, may I ask a question? In your presentation, you said that the LCC will liaise with local communities regarding things like the artists in residence. How does that actually work? Who are we liaising with?
I think this is very much our form of practice that we've developed over the past 2 or 3 years. So it will depend on what piece of work we're doing and who we're working with, because as you know better than I do, all of our communities across Leicestershire have different assets and benefits and opportunities. So what we tend to do with the programme is we'll go into an area, we'll understand what assets are available, who else is working in that area, and then we can start to make contact in terms of who they are. We're working really closely with Creative Leicestershire in terms of working with creative practitioners. So Creative Leicestershire have a fantastic network, and they support creative practitioners and artists that work across the county. So they have access to the expertise. So they will help with us in terms of recruiting people that can work with us. But that's very much starting with what a community wants to achieve and looking at what they want to do and what they want to achieve, and then us matching assets and resources to and help them deliver that.
Thanks for that, Fran. I said we don't want to sound negative. This is a brilliant achievement by the council. Thanks very much to those people who put the bid together. I appreciate you didn't get as much as you wanted, but and I appreciate in the scheme of things over 3 years, it's not huge, but it's far more money than we had before. So one never looks a gift horse in the mouth. It's better to have something than nothing. We might disagree slightly with how it's spent and where it's spent, but let's say thank you for having it, and pass on our thanks to the team who put the bid together, because I know these are difficult to do. Christine.
Yeah, can I just assure the committee that we will be keeping you all informed, and anything happening in your area will certainly let you know, and the rest of the county councillors as well. I think we need to keep them informed, that they're aware of what's happening.
Thank you very much. We've noted that report. We're now moving on to agenda item 9, which is the market sustainability plan, as set out on pages 19 to 32 of the agenda. And I see John's having a rest this meeting. I'm very impressed. So we're back to you, Indigit, and I believe you're supported by the lead commissioner, Dave Pruden. Well, I see you sitting in the corner. I can read the nameplate from this distance. I'm doing all right. So over to you for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Chair. So Scrutiny received a report in September on the market sustainability plan. So I'll call it the MSP for today's purposes, which we subsequently submitted in October last year. So this report provides an update on the work since then, which has resulted in a revised MSP document, which is attached to the papers. And we'll be submitting that at the end of this month, the 27th of March. The report also gives details around some key headlines from our fair cost of care exercise, with summary information that we published on our website and sent to the department in February. And the report also gives some brief details on our provider uplift processes for 23-24. In terms of the final MSP, so the key messages are pretty much consistent with the report from back in September and October. The key areas highlighted in the MSP, so they're pretty much detailed in paragraph 17 to 21, are around the development of, there's 5 key areas. So our nursing care market, which we've spoken about at Scrutiny a couple of times, so the need to develop that. Our approach to our personal assistant market and staff capacity, our extra care offer, our reablement and home care provision, and our provider workforce, and in the independent sector. I'll ask Dave to go through some of the details of the fair cost exercise and the published data, but before I go on to that, I'm just going to briefly touch on the provider uplifts detail within the paper. So there's been quite a lot of work within the department over the past 3 or 4 months, both with the external sector and colleagues within the wider corporate teams, which is around setting our inflation levels for 23-24. Appreciating that it's a pretty hard time for everyone in the country, really, which also includes our care providers, where they're experiencing the national living wage uplifts in April, which is circa 10%, inflation levels which are around 10%, and the cost of living in general. So before this paper was written, we hadn't notified our providers of those uplift levels, but they have now been notified. So providers do know what they're getting for next year, and they are reflective of the pressures that everyone's facing. So I'm just going to hand over to Dave briefly around some of the details that's both in the paper and the MSP around the fair cost of care exercise. So Dave, am I okay to hand over?
Thanks, Dave. If you'd assume that every member's read the report, so really just those salient points, really. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. So the situation here is that the MSP is informed by the fair cost of care analysis that was done, and you've seen two reports for fair cost of care. One of them relates to the home care market, and one of them relates to the residential care market. And you'll see that they're not too long, the reports, and they set out the basics of, you know, what the approach was to try and ascertain what the fair cost of care is in each market. Our methodology was obviously a survey. What the main results are, and of course I'm afraid these are laden with numbers, these paragraphs. I won't go into too many of those, but they are laden with numbers. What assumptions we're making about profitability in the market as well. So if I just give you one or two headlines, if we talk about residential care, for example, the fair cost of care analysis indicated that the median cost was £718 per week. That compares with our fees currently, which are £654. And our higher band fee, which is £790. So a bit of work to do in terms of a difference there. If we talk about our nursing fee, which is the fair cost of care, was net of £729, and again that compares with our fee of £654. Now, there's other information there about quartiles and about the range that we cover, but I think those are the numbers which are worth holding on to, really. In terms of home care, the fair cost of care, the median value was £21.87, and that compares with our basic home care fee of £20.25. And our home care fees go up in a range, but most of it is done at between 20.25 and 21.15. So I think what I would say is that the results that the fair cost of care exercise were yielding were reasonably close to the actual fees that we're paying. But we have to caveat the whole fair cost of care exercise, and I'm sure you've come across this before. The basic idea of trying to survey a group of providers, take out the median value and define that as the fair cost of care is challenging in many ways. It's flawed in many ways, but this was the process that we were required to follow, and we followed that process. So you'll see in the reports, there's some reference to what our concerns are with that process. For example, the home care sample was very small. So we were actually coming up with a value based on a very small sample. So that's a matter for concern anyway. Secondly, the residential market is really quite diverse. There are some people entering the residential market whose aim is to offer services to people who are self-funders, not to do business with us. So we wouldn't be in the business of trying to make placements with those organisations simply because the fees would be too high. There's a particular market segment that we have to do business with, so we need to have a focus on what the fair cost of care is within that segment. So those are the two sort of main observations that I would make in terms of the report. It's there, and it's that which has led to the findings from those two reports have been the place where we've drawn our work for the MSP, and the findings have also informed our work on fee uplifts. But it's important to distinguish they inform the fee, they don't drive it, they don't program it at all. So I'll stop there. I hope that gives a little bit of an overview of the reports and some of the issues associated with them.
Thanks very much, Dave. Just to ask questions, just a moment of puzzlement for mine. It refers in the report to Annex B, I've only got an Annex C. Is there an Annex B, or is Annex C really B?
So Annex C is the MSP. So that's the document you've got appended to the report. Annex B is a document that we submitted to the DHSC. So it's part of the suite of documents that we had to submit as part of the fair cost of care exercise. So there's a link to Annex B, I believe, in the papers.
Right. That one must have.
I appreciate it. It is pretty confusing when you're looking at a fair cost Annex A, Annex B, Annex C. So you haven't got Annex B, but that's published on our website.
Right. That's right. I just wonder if people looking at this, it's, you know, particularly members of the public, we hope to look at these meetings. It might be worth making it clearer where the link is, or even attaching Annex B to it, because most of us use mod.gov rather than go on the council website, so we can use the thumbnails. So it just might be more helpful. But Barry?
Thank you, Chair. I think drawing on one of the points that you raised about some residential is aimed at self-funding. And I picked up on a paragraph in here which says that we typically look at little more than 30% of rooms that we will fund, which means 70% are aimed at self-funding, or self-funders are paying. But obviously with self-funders, there comes a point at which they may switch to us. Do we then require them to leave those homes to move into others, or do we take that on the chin and decide that we need to leave them where they are? Because obviously you're talking people that could be vulnerable adults, etc., and the upheaval of all that move. Are people, when they are self-funding, aware that if that is the case, are people that self-fund aware that that's the likelihood once they get to that point? Because that's sort of a concerning area. And the other thing I think was a few paragraphs further down, which states that Leicester and Rutland and the NHS make fewer determinations for funded nursing care and continuing healthcare. And I know it says in here it's being discussed, but I'd be interested to know why we have a lower number of determinations than other areas. Thank you, Chair.
John, do you want to cover the second point first? Then I'll cover the first.
Okay, the CHC point. Yes. I'd also be interested to know that. So we have asked the question. We've done a bit of research, and it would appear to show that the NHS in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland have a considerably lower number of people who are determined to have continuing healthcare needs and fully funded nursing care needs than A, the national average, B, the regional average, or C, any other system that we can find. So we did the research last year. We asked the question last year. Subsequent to that, as part of the fair cost of care work, as colleagues have said, the company that we worked with and that Leicester City and Rutland, that Leicester City worked with, also picked up on that same point and have raised it as a concern, both in terms of the sustainability of the nursing sector, because obviously, in order for nursing homes to attract people with nursing fee levels, they need a determination by the NHS. So if those determinations aren't being made, it calls into question the sustainability of the nursing care sector. And it may be one of the reasons why we have significantly fewer nursing beds than do other areas. But it also links to quality of care, because if providers are not receiving sufficient funding through the NHS, then there is a question about whether or not they can properly staff those care homes and whether that has an impact on the quality of care that's given. So we've raised it as a clinical risk with NHS colleagues, and there is a piece of work being undertaken now to do some further analysis to understand why the position is as it appears to be, and whether in fact there is an issue that we need to address within that.
I'll just come back on that point, because the thing is with continuing healthcare, it's quite prescriptive systems, like 15 points that you go through to determine if somebody needs continuing healthcare. I mean, obviously we might just be a much healthier place, but if that's not the case, I found it very strange knowing how the system works, that you couldn't, it doesn't really come down to different people making a coming up with a different, in two different areas, coming up with different viewpoints, because the evidence is pretty much in front of you.
Indeed, and I would also argue that we're no healthier in this area than in other areas. There's no evidence to support that the joint strategic needs assessment doesn't suggest that people in Leicester and Leicestershire are healthier than people in other areas. The other interesting fact, of course, is that those determinations are carried out on behalf of the ICB by a commissioning support unit who also provide that same service for many other areas in the country. So they don't just work in this area, they work across the whole swathe of the country. And yet in those areas, the determinations are different, it would appear.
Just to go on what John was saying there, so I think it's fair to say that there has been, I think we've raised the issue around FNC and CHC over the past few months, but more recently it's got more traction. So as John was saying, there's an organisation that's looking at what is the actual position. We've got some meetings tomorrow with them from a county perspective and a city perspective as well. So it's not just a county piece. Around how it's kind of how it's kind of manifested itself into what it is. So it is becoming more raised on the agenda, especially from our perspective. So I guess the ICB are now listening to what the position is, but bearing in mind that I think John's raised it quite a few times with them, and as have we as officers. So definitely kind of on the agenda. Dave, do you want to cover the point one? I'll jump in if need.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, in terms of point one, people who are paying for their own fees in a home, paying a fee which is higher than the rate at which we would pay, and then their resources become depleted, so they're now former self-funders, and the council has a responsibility to pick up some of that funding. There's no blanket rule. Each individual case is considered in a person-centered way on the basis of that individual and the well-being of that individual. So we would explore whether a third-party top-up could be used in order to augment it. We would explore whether it was appropriate to consider moving the person or asking the person to move to a different care home, and we do explore whether we have to make up the difference ourselves. I don't have any data to present on that, but my experience of working in this area is that we often find that we have to make up the fee itself in order to support the well-being of the individual.
Chair, just to say as well, sorry, it's fair to say as well though that where it gets to a position where the council has to make that difference, so there is a level of negotiation as well with the care homes. So we wouldn't, a care home wouldn't want to throw someone out. Essentially, they've known the person for a long time, known the family, built relationships, etc. So, where we come in and say, okay, there's a gap here, and we've got our, what's our negotiated position, and usually we find a decent medium between the two.
Leon?
Thank you, Chair. A few things from my understanding. First of all, I would say I understand the drawback of the small sample, but using the median instead of average or mode, I think actually much more descriptive. When we go to page 20, the median for care homes, 719, this is per day, per week. And the median for nursing homes, 98 per week. So when we go to home care, further down, it is 2187 per hour. This is the median. But you see, there is no any reference how many is the average or the median hours to give us an understanding how much we pay for home care. Because you see 21.87 multiplied by 24 equals 525 per day. That's significantly different from the 719 per week. So having somebody in a care home per week is 719. If you have actually a home care and it is 24 hours, so I'm sure it is not 24 hours, corresponds to 525. This is massive difference. So much better to have somebody in care home. Further down, this is another part of my question, is the county council urban rate is 20.25, rising to 26.45 in isolated areas. I assume these travel expenses. And I do not really understand the part in page 21. A limitation of this approach is that it does not allow for the urban-rural continuum. Can you please explain to me? Thanks.
I'll cover off the first bit, then Dave, you can cover the urban piece. So in terms of kind of, I guess, 719 as a weekly rate versus what you said around a 24-hour rate of 525 a day. So most people, so our average home care package is around 13 to 14 hours a week. So if you think around the weekly cost of someone at home, even at 20, 30 hours of care a week, it's still well below the care home rate. And our system priority is to keep people at home. So hopefully our last resort is someone to go into a care home. Ideally, they stay at home with care and support. It's better for the person, it's better for their outcomes, it's better for their well-being, but also it's financially better for the council to keep someone at home and the wider system as well. So I understand what you're saying around actually, if someone's 24 hours a day at home at £21, absolutely it's cheaper to have them in a care home, but there are very few people on those packages.
It is confusing. it really is quite confusing unless you're immersed in it, really. So in terms of the urban-rural continuum, if I draw a comparison between the county and the city, of course the city operate in a very tight geographical area, and that has an effect on the travelling costs involved in their cost of care, because many of their carers are able to walk. But in the county, we have rural settings. So one of the things we've done with our fee rates is we've structured it at 4 levels. We have urban, what we call fringe, rural, and isolated, and we have higher levels of fee for the rural and isolated. So because of the additional cost of travel expenditure in terms of petrol, but also time in terms of getting there, and the particular challenges for a provider who might find it difficult to be able to provide 2 or 3 packages of care through a care run, which can be spread quite significantly. So that's why you get this different issue. Our shorthand is that we refer to that as the urban-rural continuum. And one of the challenges with the fair cost of care analysis as it works out is that following the analysis that we had to follow, it didn't take that into account at all. So we come up with numbers which to some extent there's value in them. There's value in the exercise. And it's useful to inform what we do with fees, but we shouldn't let it direct exactly what we do with fees, that's for sure.
Just for my understanding, thank you very much for your explanation. So, sorry, I will go through the numbers one more time. So when we go to care home is 720 approximately per week. This makes times 4. That is approximately £3,000 a month. For the nursing home is 938 multiplied by 4, approximately £3,600 a month. It's pretty big numbers. And if we go to the home care, which is approximately 14 hours per week, multiplied by 21.87 is approximately £300 a week. in a month is approximately £1,200. So these actually are numbers I just try to keep in my mind. We go from £1,200 if you are at home, you go actually to £2,800, and or possibly in a nursing home, £3,600. Am I incorrect?
That's probably right.
Thank you.
I think the piece is a lot. It's need as well. So the level of need. So you wouldn't want to someone who can be supported at home to be in a care home, because ultimately they can be at home and they should be at home. So someone in a care home should be someone who can't be supported at home, hence need for 24-hour care, and you get that as a care home placement. But yeah, in terms of your numbers, you're broad.
Did you want to come in still, Betty?
Yes, I think in a sense you've covered part of what I wanted to know. It's the differential between urban and rural, and it seems that the isolated areas, you've mitigated that to some extent. So can I have assurances that the rural areas are not losing out in any way in terms of having provision of care? Thank you.
It's relatively recent that we did that, so we are happy that we are now supporting rural and isolated areas better than we have done previously. I guess one of the key pieces of evidence on that is that we monitor how long it takes for people to get into care, and we had quite a significant problem with that in the past, and we think that we've really managed that to really quite a minimum level. So I think that that's an important thing. I think as well, when we look at where the growth has been in the market recently, I was slightly surprised that we hadn't seen higher levels of growth in rural and urban. We've seen quite a lot of growth in home care in recent years, really quite significant levels. And they've mainly been in the urban and fringe areas, but there is some smaller growth in rural too. So yeah, I think we probably are in as good a place as we've been hitherto.
Thank you. Just a couple of quickies from me. But one stems from the answer that John gave to his part of the question about this wonderfully named Commissioning Support Unit. If we keep asking the questions, when do we actually believe we're going to get an answer? And would the easy way not just be putting a freedom of information request in on the Commissioning Support Unit to ask what they're being asked to do by other areas compared to Leicestershire, which might give us the answer. And my second question, which doesn't relate to that, is anecdotally, for people I know who've had to put people in care recently, the costs have escalated enormously over recent weeks. I mean, one friend who's paying £1,200 a week for their mother, just because I know places, because the market appears to be distorted by the government having to provide some central funds to get people out of care homes into nursing homes, which has distorted the number of places. So do we believe the market will come back to more normal times, or will we have to go through this exercise again in the not too distant future, because we will have become, through no fault of our own, out of sync with the new reality in the marketplace, if that makes sense to you?
Right, okay. So in terms of the Commissioning Support Unit, the Commissioning Support Unit acts on behalf of the Integrated Care Board. They take their instructions from the Integrated Care Board, and they work to the local policy that's given to them. But of course, they have local managers, local nurses making those determinations. So it's perfectly feasible that different decisions are being made in our area to the decisions that have been made in other areas, which is why we've asked NHS colleagues to have a look at that, and that's the work that they're doing at the moment. So we'll wait for that work to take place. In terms of the market, will we see it return? I don't think we'll be very surprised if we saw a return to sort of fee levels that we saw maybe a few years ago. I think there has, in terms of, well, stability is, yes. So in terms of stability, the key issue that we've got is nursing care beds. So in residential care, although we have fewer beds than other authorities in both residential care and nursing care, we have sufficient beds in residential care. In nursing care, there is an issue about the size of the market. Although the quality is very good and above average, there is an issue in terms of the number of beds that are available, and an issue, I suppose, in terms of choice. In order to bring more providers into the county, in order to expand the market, as any business would, they will look to see whether or not there is a viable return, and they will look to see that there is a demand for the service that they are offering. So if the demand continues to be low, we won't see new market entrants. Unless, as Indy's already intimated, that market is specifically being aimed at people who can fund their own care.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. And I'd ask members to bear in mind those comments as well, because we do touch on this same topic in the next paper, paper 10, about the issue with nursing care within the marketplace. I've no doubt we'll be returning to this on a regular basis if we're for those of us that might still be on this committee after May, going forward. And I think it's something that we've been very grateful being kept up to date on. And you know we do a good job, and you know the simple fact is that councils haven't got enough money to do this properly. But I think if we can get some information out of the NHS to actually perhaps bring our marketplace more into line in Leicestershire, it might assist both us and our residents going forward. So thanks for the efforts you're making on fighting the valiant fight over there, John, with Indigit as well, about trying to get this information out and find out why there is that distortion. So we're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is the Adult Social Care Assurance Self-Assessment, as set out in pages 33 to 84. I know you'll take us briefly through this, John. I suppose the salient points to me would be that following the working group, and you've itemised those points that the working group raised, are you satisfied we built those into the CQC plan? And you might just want to make a few comments on those. We certainly wouldn't expect you to go through 49 pages.
Thanks. Yeah, no, you'd be very pleased to hear. I have no intention of going through that. So what you've got today is the latest version of the self-assessment document. As you know, we were wanting to get ourselves into a position where we had a viable self-assessment document ready for April the 1st, when the new assurance regime takes effect. I think we can be confident now that we have reached that position. So this is the latest version. As we've said before, it's a dynamic document, it's a live document. We'll be updating it on a very regular basis to make sure that it completely reflects and is relevant to the work that we're doing at any given time. So the document you've got today has been updated, as you say, following the workshop that was held in February. We will continue to update it, and we'll probably want to refresh it in August, but I'll come back to that in a second. What we've got today is the document itself. The report gives you a summary of those areas where we think we're strong, but also those areas where we know we need to improve, and there will then be an improvement plan that will be developed on the back of that. We've also given you some information about the consultation that's taken place, the engagement that's taken place in terms of developing the document. And I'll just give us a sort of a brief update in terms of timelines, and then I'll hand over to Ashley, who has joined us and who has put this document together, because Ashley's also done a bit of an analysis of those areas that were picked up at the workshop and how we've addressed those within the document. So I'll let Ashley respond to that point. Where we are at the moment is, and the latest information we've got, is that from April, the CQC for the first 6 months from April, will continue to pilot their assessment methodology, and they'll pick half a dozen local authorities to do further pilot assessment work with, although they will be rated. At the same time, they will be developing their own profiles of each of the 152 local authorities with social care responsibilities. So they will develop a profile of each authority based on information that they've got from the Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework, national framework, information they're picking up from NHS Digital in terms of activity and performance, information from Social Care Ombudsman in terms of complaints. So they'll develop a profile of each local authority. When we then give them our self-assessment, they'll then check our self-assessment against the profile that they've already got. And then when they come and visit, they'll ask people who use services, carers, members, partners, others, about that kind of self-assessment to check whether or not what we're saying to them rings true. So that's the kind of the process. They intend to use that first 6 months to build up those profiles, to do the pilot assessment. And then from September, they will run 20 local authority visits between September and December, and another 20 between December and the following April. So by the end of year one, they'll have done sort of 46-ish, give or take, assessments of local authorities. And then they'll get into a rolling cycle from there. So it would look from that if they think they can do 40 to 50 within a 6 month period, it will take them 2 years to get through all 152, which is not dissimilar from Ofsted. It takes Ofsted 3 years to go through the whole cycle of local authorities. So that's what we know. We've no indication as yet as to who the 6 in the first 6 months will be. With no reason to believe that we'll be one of them. On the other hand, we've no reason to believe we wouldn't. So at this stage, so that's the process as we know it at the moment. We would probably therefore intend to want to bring back an update report, at least on an annual basis, to committee as we kind of go through that process. But we can obviously do it more frequently if required. But I'll hand over to Ashley just to pick out those bits of the assessment document that we've updated and changed and amended following the workshop.
Thanks, John. So just in terms of the changes made since the workshop, one of the key comments that came out from the session was that the document should be more concise and sort of positive around Leicestershire and our services, and sort of promote and celebrate our strengths. And there was also a suggestion that we develop a sort of 1 or 2 page summary of the overall narrative in the document. So the narrative has been revised to make it more positive, and we've added a foreword before the introduction, which summarises the overall narrative and particularly focuses on what we do well. Whilst the overall length of the document remains the same, it's still quite a long document. As John mentioned, we're continuously updating and revising it. But a lot more useful content has been added to it as well since we shared it at the workshop. So things around sort of how people can access adult social care services. There's information about advocacy services, how we make sure that people's well-being is protected while they await for an assessment, and various other useful bits of information which link quite well to the CQC's framework. And you'll notice obviously that the structure of the document has been revised into a table format as well, which we think makes it easier to review, so you can kind of skim through and see where the evidence supports each statement and things. A further comment from Scrutiny was from the workshop was for us to be bolder in highlighting our dependencies on partner agencies. So linking in with the discussions earlier around continuing healthcare and funding nursing care determinations. So row 2.4 in the document under the providing support theme explores those issues in detail and sort of highlights how they may have led to fewer nursing care options in Leicestershire, and includes an improvement action for us to explore that issue further with health partners, as Indy mentioned. There was also a suggestion that we engage the Cabinet Lead Member for Health on the self-assessment to ensure that in any interactions with particularly health partners, we're sharing consistent messages. So our intention is to engage the lead member sort of following today's hopeful approval of the current draft, so we can then sort of engage the lead member on the sort of latest confirmed narrative. There was a suggestion that we provide more detail on how we intend to improve access to information and advice about adult social care services, and suggestions that we make better use of district councils' communication channels and district council members to share information and advice. So row 1.14 sets out more detail on how we intend to improve access to information, such as by developing printed materials, and sharing information in community locations like GP surgeries and through the local area coordinators, and also sets out our intention to make use of district channels. So that's an area we need to explore further. In terms of the council's website, sort of links to the same point, it was suggested that we should seek feedback from residents on how easy it is to access information and advice on our website, and also explore potentially commissioning an external evaluation of the website to identify how it could improve in terms of access and simplicity of information and things. So we mentioned, I think, at the workshop that significant work is underway to engage people with lived experience of social care services to find out what they think about how easy it is or not to access information, particularly on our website. So we've engaged sort of learning disability locality group members in the community, and they've provided quite substantial feedback around how easy it was to find certain bits of information on the website, such as around direct payments, for example. So we're currently analysing that, and we're going to share that with colleagues to help inform redesign of the website. We're also doing similar sessions with the engagement panel, the department's engagement panel members, which represents adult social care service user groups, sort of across all groups. So the panel members are reviewing sort of fact sheets on certain areas like adult social care finance to see how easy it is to understand the content. And we also intend to run some sort of sessions, sort of deep dive sessions with panel members to kind of see how they would approach finding information about certain topics on the website, sort of in real time, so we can see the kind of barriers that they come across. So we're also, in terms of actually developing the website, colleagues are currently reviewing and updating the printed materials we provide, and that will in turn inform the content on the website, on the web pages. And having reviewed other websites, other councils' websites, colleagues have also suggested that there's opportunities to improve the layout of our own website, and there's also there's an aim now to introduce more video content to explain the content in different mediums, particularly for people who are sort of more visual learners. So yeah, any external evaluation of the website would need to be commissioned corporately. So that's being explored and discussed with corporate colleagues at the moment. Finally, so there was a suggestion that we set out in the document the improvements made to the Safeguarding Adults Board in recent years. So more detail has been added to table rows 3.9 and 3.10 around what the board has achieved in recent years, such as the range of training and resources it's developed on areas like hidden harm and risks to people with learning disabilities, and its work to embed making safeguarding personal. And table row 3.10 sets out the number of safeguarding adults reviews it's completed in recent years, and now includes a series of action plans that have been developed in response to those. And there was also a final sort of query around the safeguarding adults training completion rates. So the original self-assessment included a snapshot of training completion rates as of sort of February this year, and sort of presented quite a positive picture around those rates. So we've gathered more up-to-date sort of data on those rates, which still seem around the same sort of percentages as was in the original self-assessment. And we're just sort of engaging the lead practitioner for safeguarding to find out if all care pathway staff should have completed those courses, because that'll obviously have an impact on the actual figures, percentages. So we'll probably have to get back to you on that one, but it generally seems positive around most of the courses. There's a couple where there's potentially an opportunity to increase the training completion rate, but the core sort of safeguarding adults courses, mental capacity act courses, and all have quite high completion rates, like 70%, 62%, etc. I think that was it. Thanks.
Right, thanks for that, Ashley. Just before I pass on to members, I think I do like the new format. I think the new format's great. It's going to be far easier to update because we can pick out those sessions. Having read it, I do think it reflects far better on what we do here, because we had sold ourselves short, and John knows it's a pet hate of mine that we keep on selling ourselves short as county. We do a damn good job, and sometimes we need to tell people we do a damn good job. And also the fact that we do need to actually not lay blame where it results, but we do need to actually ask searching questions of those that need to work with us so we can actually improve the service for all. And I think this does it in a considerably better way. So I think it shows the value of the workshop, and hopefully those that weren't able to attend the workshop have seen the difference in the two documents. But I think it's a real great, and I know you talked about a year, John. I just think it might be one of those where if we feel that after the first 6 months, seeing how it's going elsewhere, we might want to bring it back. I know it still refers to 6 months here. It might just be worth having that at the back of our mind on the agenda planning sessions. If we don't need it, let's make it a year. If we do need it, let's bring it back. And it may be an area for a future workshop going forward anyway, once we got more experience under our belt. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I echo a lot of the points that you just raised. I missed the workshop. I'd booked a holiday a week before I got the notification of this, so and I enjoyed the holiday actually. But it's a really good document. It actually works for someone like myself who's only been on this a couple of years now. It's actually a really good way of cross-referencing back, reading through and understanding a lot of the things that keep popping up in our report, and in here there's a bigger explanation, etc. I've gone through it, but I'm going to be going through it again and again probably, because there's really useful information and it'll sink in more as you go through, and there's a lot to take in, to be quite honest. But what'll be interesting is obviously when it does come back before us to look at, it would be really useful to know which sections have changed. And you've got this big green bar running down the side. I'm on 1.2 at the moment. 1.2 was blue instead of green. I know that when it comes back before us, I read all the blue ones because they're all the things that have changed, because I'm going to go through this in detail over the months anyway and really take and really absorb it. I'd hate to have to keep doing that every 6 months, but if you can make sure we really know which bits, you don't even have to highlight which lines you've done. If you just say that section has changed, great, I'll read that whole section again, but it will help us as we go on to monitor the changes rather than keep going over the same document. Thank you.
Neil?
It's the usual order here. Right, I have 2 points. First of all, when we go to page 53, paragraph 115, where it reads actually that the council ranked in the worst 25% of the authorities for the percentage of service users and carers who reported they had as much as social contact as they would like to have. This is actually pretty alerting. And when we go to the actions in the column on the right, when you read this one, I'm sorry, for my standards, it is not actually convincing enough. I would like actually something more solid, something more, we're going to do 1, 2, 3. So that's my personal perception about this. I have a second point, which is when we go to page 42, this lovely graph there. On the left side, it reads 59.4% estimated dementia diagnosis rate, age 65 and over in 2022. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this number, because if you go through the official NHS documents, dementia between 65 and 69 is 2%. And when you go actually to the age between 85 and 89, it is 20%. So how come actually from 65 to 69, you have 2%. From 85 to 89, you have the maximum, which is 20%. But in this document, actually, it appears to be 59.4% above the age of 65. I think this is a massive, massive overestimate.
So I'll answer the first point. I'll let Ashley answer the second one if he can, but I'm impressed if he can answer it. So on the first point around the people having as much social contact as they would like, it is concerning. It comes from the Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework, which is a survey that's undertaken every year. We send out survey questions to people who have drawn on services during the year and ask them to respond. And in the last survey, that was the figure we got back. Of course, people having as much social contact as they would like is obviously it's a subjective kind of perceptive kind of response, and not necessarily has everything to do with social care. So people may or may not have had a social care service which has enabled them to have as much social contact as they would like. It may just be that for all sorts of personal and family and community reasons, they don't have the contact they would want to have. It may be nothing to do with social care, but nevertheless, it is on our outcomes framework. So I think, as it sort of says within the text, we are looking to work more comprehensively with the voluntary and community sector to see whether or not we can establish services in the community that would enable people to have more social contact. What we can't do is provide significant additional funding to that, simply because as a council we don't have it. So we have to work within the resources that we've got, and I think, you know, we've said at this committee previously, when we've had conversations about how do we continue to provide services and how do we continue to meet people's needs with lower levels of expenditure than other councils, one of the areas that other councils probably spend more money on than we do is on social contact. Because what we have to concentrate on is making sure that we meet people's personal care needs, absolutely, in terms of quality of life. What we can't always do is provide as much in the way of social activity as perhaps other councils do who have more money than us. So it's a challenge, but it is one that, you know, we put it in the report because we recognise it as a challenge. We know we need to address it, and we're hopeful that there is a survey going on at the moment. We get the results back in May, and we're hoping, obviously, that particular indicator will go up. But, you know, if it doesn't, then we'll have to double down on making sure that we address it more fully. In terms of the diagnosis rates, I mean, I know they come from the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, but whether you know any more information than me on that one, Ashley?
Well, I think Indy might know a little bit.
I think I'll jump in.
Okay, yeah.
So it's probably confused. It's a confusing piece here. So I think what that's saying is that of those people who have dementia, 59.4% have a coded diagnosis. So it's of those that have. So it's not saying that 59% of people over 65 have dementia. It's of those with dementia, nearly 60% have a coded diagnosis. So that's this
is totally different.
Yeah, it doesn't read like that. So that does need amending because it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, you're right. It's from the Public Health England sort of fingertips profiles, and it is the diagnosis rate. So I suppose it's looking at sort of how good we are at diagnosing dementia. So yeah, we can make that a lot clearer, I think. Thanks.
Thanks. So it's interesting because I read it exactly the way you did, and it just goes to show that different people read different things in different ways, and therefore clarity of language is always as essential as best as we can make it in the circumstance to make sure it's clear and, you know, two people don't come up with different things. So it's a good point, well made, Leon, that it's always good to have different views so we can actually get the right language on these things to make it as sensible as possible. So filling from the questions that we're all happy with where we are at the moment. We're happy with the our starting point. It's going to be kept under review, a living, working document, and we are happy to support this document as the committee. Is that the case? Right, so thanks to everybody who put time and effort into this. I think it's a far better document than where it started, which I think shows the value of scrutiny and working together. And let's take it with us, and let's hope that, I don't know, I secretly think John wants to be in the first 6, but I can never tell. So now we're moving on to the final agenda item of today, which is the Social Care Reform Programme update, which is pages, it's 80, put my glasses on, I'll be able to see, 85 to 96 on the agenda. And it's with John, supported by Christine Collingwood. So again, over to you, John.
Yeah, so it's our usual report on the Social Care Reform Programme. We tend to bring one, well, we have tended to bring one to each committee meeting over the course of the last 12 months as the programme has developed. This is a brief report which sets out our response to the changes that the government have made, particularly to charging reform, where, as you know, they've pushed back a little bit and delayed the introduction of charging reform. And in the light of that and changes to other parts of the reform programme, we have also taken a step back and reviewed our own internal programme works. So what the report lays out is our response to that, but also includes some commentary around an internal audit that was undertaken of the sort of programme governance and of the programme arrangements, which we thought it was helpful to bring to committee's attention. We've revised the programme from being quite a large, comprehensive programme of sort of 6-7 work streams down to a programme of work with just 3 work streams, and those are outlined at paragraph 12 within the report, and we've had reports on 2 of those today. So the Market Sustainability Plan and the CQC assurance process. The third area is around developing wider improvements as part of the adult social care finance process. I think what we're looking to suggest today is that in future, rather than having a report on every meeting as we have been doing, we'd probably bring a report on those 3 areas as and when it was appropriate for each of those. So it might be, for example, that the fair cost of care and the MSP area comes to a conclusion fairly shortly. The CQC assurance process obviously will continue, and we've just talked about when we might bring reports back on that one, and we'd probably seek to bring a report back on the adult social care we policy and process at a point in time when we've done a little bit more on that. We're currently doing a diagnostic piece, and we'll then start to put in train a set of improvements, and at that point we'd probably bring that back for committee's comment. I think that's probably all I wanted to say. Is there anything you want to pick up, Christine?
I don't think so. I think that covers everything.
Sorry, thanks for that, John. I found it quite interesting, actually, that with the 2 reports that preceded it, actually puts it into quite good context, dropping into this report. But Barry?
Just to say, I'm happy with what John suggested in the way that you bring that forward in future. That's fine.
don't think there's any other comments. Again, I think that's, I think the committee are there. And I think, as I said just now, this brings it into context with the others, and then we can work out which bits to look at as they require it, because it may be that the CQC takes over our lives, depending on what happens. We hope it doesn't. We hope we're in year 3, because that'll be after the next election. But who knows? So no further questions, so thank you for that. The date of the next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 5th of June at 2 p.m. There were no urgent items, so can I thank everybody for their input today. Can I thank everybody who may be watching this at home or listening to it in the future. I'd like to think that quite a few members of the public listen. Do we ever know how many people are on? Oh, I'll have to have a look. Let's hope it's going up. Let's hope that that John's present just brings another 100 on each time. But it'd be good to see. But thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.